Sometimes the most consequential acts of diplomacy happen not in conference halls but in the sky. Monday's Gaza Peace Summit in el-Sheikh, intended to formalise the fragile ceasefire and sketch a framework for Gaza's post-war reconstruction, nearly collapsed before it began, and it was President Recep Tayyip Erdogan of Turkey who quite literally kept it aloft. According to multiple diplomatic sources, Erdogan's intervention led directly to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's withdrawal from the summit. What unfolded was a moment of high political theatre and cold calculation. As Erdogan's presidential plane approached Egyptian airspace, he was informed that Donald Trump had personally invited Netanyahu to join the meeting at the last minute. Erdogan's response was immediate and unequivocal. He ordered his pilot to circle above the Red Sea, and he would not land if Netanyahu was on Egyptian soil. From his plane, Erdogan telephoned Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, making clear that Turkey and several other Muslim-majority states would boycott the summit if Netanyahu attended. Within an hour, Netanyahu's office announced he would not travel to Egypt, citing the proximity of the event to Simchat Torah holiday. And few were fooled by this explanation. Erdogan's airborne ultimatum had worked. I mean, really, frankly, it is ridiculous when Netanyahu quite ostensibly works on Shabbos. This episode tells us three things about the modern Middle Eastern diplomacy. First, it shows Erdogan's acute political instinct. At home, he faces sharp criticism from his Islamist base and conservative allies who accuse him of hypocrisy, condemning Israel's actions in Gaza as genocide, while Turkish ports continue to facilitate indirect trade, particularly oil exports routed through Azerbaijan. Sharing a stage at a loner handshake with Netanyahu would have been politically suicidal. Erdogan knew this. His refusal to land was both a moral stance and an act of political survival. Second, it demonstrates Turkey's evolving power position. Erdogan has long cast himself as the defender of the Muslim world, but here he also acted as a pragmatic diplomat. Turkey maintains back-channel relations with Israel, though through intelligence links, through trade, through regional coordination in Syria, yet Ankara's moral and symbolic leverage over Hamas and its unique ability to speak to all sides, including Qatar and Egypt, made it indispensable. Erdogan's threat was therefore credible. Without Turkey, the summit would lose legitimacy across the Arab world. Third, it reveals the fragility of Trump's peace architecture. The former US president, who is now current president, this extraordinary man, Trump, had hoped to choreograph a grand tableau of reconciliation to, I suppose, cement the beginnings of his second presidency. Maybe he wanted it earlier, but now he's got it. It's tenuous. Arab leaders, Western allies, and Israel united under his self-styled board of peace. Instead, his invitation to Netanyahu backfired. As I think will his demand to the president of Israel that Netanyahu be exonerated for all his dodginess. But several Arab and Muslim leaders reportedly warned that they would also refuse to attend if the Israeli Prime Minister appeared. Erdogan's stand provided them political cover. By forcing Netanyahu out, Erdogan inadvertently saved Trump from open diplomatic humiliation. And there is irony here. Erdogan and Netanyahu have traded insults for years. Erdogan accuses Israel of genocide. Netanyahu calls Erdogan a supporter of terrorism. Yet through this confrontation, Erdogan preserved the very summit that may determine Gaza's reconstruction and his own potential role in it. But make no mistake, Turkey's ambitions in post-war Gaza are immense. Ankara wants a place in the international stabilization force that will oversee security, reconstruction and governance, and Turkish construction firms are already lobbying for contracts to rebuild hospitals, schools and homes. The Turkish military, with its long record in peacekeeping operations from the Balkans to Somalia, is positioning itself as an essential partner. In the days before the summit, Erdogan's intelligence chief, Ibrahim Kalin, quietly met with Israeli officials to prepare for this possible cooperation. The paradox is striking: public hostility, private coordination. It is a familiar dance in Erdogan's foreign policy, fiery rhetoric masking pragmatic engagement. Still, One cannot ignore the symbolism of that circling aircraft above the Red Sea. It represented both Erdogan's domestic constraints and his international leverage. For his supporters, it was a demonstration of strength, the man who made Netanyahu retreat. For the Americans, it was a reminder that Turkey's cooperation cannot be taken for granted. For Egypt, it was a lesson in realpolitik. The regional diplomacy now requires managing not just Washington and Jerusalem, but Ankara's unpredictable orbit. In retrospect, Erdogan's refusal to land until Netanyahu withdrew was less about ego than equilibrium. It prevented a diplomatic walkout, it preserved the summit's Muslim participation, and allowed the ceasefire framework to proceed without collapsing into farce. The episode also underscored Israel's isolation. Netanyahu's government is now under international criminal court warrants, facing threats of resignation from its own far-right ministers and excluded from an Arab-led discussion on Gaza's future. That exclusion was sealed not by Western diplomacy, but by one man's political gamble mid-flight. When historians write of this fragile peace process, they may recall that the summit in Sharm el-Sheikh did not begin in a hall but in a cockpit. Erdogan's intervention prevented a walkout, protected his domestic standing, and preserved the possibility, however faint, of a regional dialogue without humiliation. The irony, of course, is that in saving the summit, Erdogan also confirmed how deeply fractured the post-war landscape remains. The peace of Gaza will depend on uneasy partners, Egypt, Qatar, the United States and Turkey, and it will depend on leaders who can keep their planes in the air long enough to prevent diplomacy from crashing.